Hi friends, this is Jen. Today I have something a little different for you. I am going to test several waterproof, water-resistant inks, um, all of which are pigment inks with, I think, the exception of the Noodler's X Feather Black, which is a cellulose reactive ink, meaning that it reacts with paper fibers. The dye it uses reacts with paper fibers to make it permanent. So, I think what I'm going to do is list the inks that we're going over and then show you the different sheen properties and how the writing looks a little closer. And then I want to do a highlighter test and a water test on camera with these. So, I've got 6 water-resistant blacks, Platinum Chou, Noodler's X Feather, Atramentis Document Black, Pilot Tsuwairo Black, Platinum Carbon Black, and Sailor Nanopigment Kiwaguro. I also have Atramentis Document Urban Gray and 3 waterproof blue inks, which are the Sailor Souboku, the Pilot Tsuwairo Blue Black, and the Sailor Seiboku. So, of these inks, I would say the sheeniest ones are going to be the Platinum Carbon Black and the Kiwaguro. On this paper, the Kiwaguro doesn't look like it's as wet. Well, it doesn't have as much sheen. It's also not as wet. So for wetness, what I look at is the thickness of the squiggle here and the thickness of the writing. Since I'm using the same tools for all of the swatches, that kind of gives an idea of how much ink comes off onto the page with similar treatment. So the more ink that comes off more easily, I would say that's a wetter ink, flows more readily. And the wettest is probably the Platinum Carbon Black, followed by the Pilot Tsuwairo. And then I would say the Noodler's X Feather, Chou and Atramentis inks are similar in wetness, I would say. And the Sailor Kiwaguro is slightly drier, but I've heard it takes a long time to dry on the page. So I'm not sure how all those things are related, but I wanted to pass that along. For the blue inks, none of them have a whole lot of sheen. Actually, I'm not sure if they really have sheen on this paper. It's just more a matter of like the different colors. So the Souboku's a little bit almost more greenish blue-black than the Tsuwairo blue-black. And it's not as wet. So the Tsuwairo flows really readily and it tends to make finer point pens look a little broader. And the Seiboku and the Souboku are similar in wetness. With the writing, I would say that the Seiboku feels smoother for some reason. The Seiboku and the Platinum Carbon Black are probably the smoothest inks out of the bunch. And I think that's all I want to say about that before doing the highlighter test. So for the highlighter, I just have this erasable highlighter. It's from a company called Hanku, Hanku, that was recommended by Letters and Lattes on Instagram. I love Kelly's stuff. She does the best lettering and she has an awesome subscription of pens every month if you're into that. So I'm just going to highlight the brand name for each of these and then I'll hold it a little closer to the camera to see if there's any smearing. Well, that definitely smeared. So I'm just going to grab a sheet of paper so that I can clean off. I can clean off the residual that got onto the highlighter. Okay. So far, these are not doing so great with highlighting. So what I like about highlighting and showing that on camera for you guys is that it's a little bit like going over this with a brush, which is like what you do if you were using it with watercolor or something. So if it smears with the highlighter, there is definitely a chance it would smear with the physical agitation of a brush. Okay, so far the Atramentis inks both look amazing, and the only other one that did okay is the Platinum Carbon Black. Everything else is smearing a lot. Okay, well, that was a lot more exciting than I was expecting it to be. Clearly we had a lot of smearing with the Platinum Chokuro, even more with the Noodler's X Feather, none with the Atramentis, Document Black, a little bit with the Pilot Tsuwairo, but it's still noticeable. Platinum Carbon Black actually did really well as well. Sailor smeared, let's see, a little more than Pilot Tsuwairo and less than Platinum Chokuro. The Atramentis Document Urban Gray didn't smear at all. And all three of the blue inks seem to have done really well. So I don't see any smearing in the blue inks. So, all right. So now is the moment of truth. I'm going to use this pipette. I'm going to use this pipette. It's a 2 milliliter pipette. I'm going to drop some water on the swatch area, the swiggle area, the grid, the writing, and the lines. And then I'll come back after I finish applying water to all of them and remove the water with a paper towel. So I'll do that. Looks like I'm running low on water. I'll add some more. Okay, so I think that was a pretty intense amount of water to add to the page. And now I'm gonna see if I can get that water up. So take a look at where the drops are, because I think that most of these are gonna do really well. So we'll see if we can pick up a difference in where the drops were compared to where there weren't any drops. So I'm also going to flip over the paper towel at the end of picking up the moisture on each ink to see if there's any residual that we can detect. I didn't see any residual on the Chou. With the Noodler's X Feather, it looks like the ink, some of the ink's already dissolving into the water a little, so it's definitely some residual color, kind of a purpley color coming up with that one. So yeah, you can see the purple ink. So I'm not expecting anything to come up on the document black, because I think if it can withstand the highlighter, it should also withstand water just fine. And I don't see any residue on there. Okay. This is the Pilot Tsuwairo. Nothing there. So I guess I posted some black inks on Reddit yesterday, and someone had asked, like, why bother with waterproof ink? You're going swimming with your journal? And it's like, you know, for most things, waterproof ink is maybe a little overkill, but sometimes accidents happen, or if you are like me and you journal a lot, and sometimes I get emotional when I'm journaling and I start to cry. I've got tears on my page, you know, kind of like what you see here. And it's nice not to ruin an entire page of writing because you cried, which is kind of the point of journaling for me, is to kind of just get all my feelings processed. So that sometimes means I'm doing a fair bit of crying about stuff that made me sad, hurt me. The thing is, if you do have an accident where you, like, you know, you're crying on your page, you spill something on it, you do just want to dab, like just put something really absorbent over the spill and dab it. Don't wipe it, because wiping it is going to add that mechanical agitation to whatever pigment's sitting on top of the page, and that's going to cause it to smear if there is any likelihood of smearing. So yeah, I'm not seeing any residue on any of these other ones that I just cleaned up. Okay, no residue on the Souboku either, which, yeah. Okay. Oops, stole one of the droplets from the Seiboku there. But okay, no smearing. Well, it does seem like something is happening here. Like maybe there's a speck of loose pigment or something that I'm not sure. Okay, so one thing I didn't talk about is this paper and how important paper is for your any kind of test, or what kind of appearance or characteristics you're looking for in the inks to come out. This is Kokuyo business paper. It comes in a ream, I think, of 500 A4 sheets. I got mine on Amazon because I couldn't find it elsewhere for a very reasonable price, and it's not widely available here. It's been recommended as a relatively inexpensive, like basic paper to use, and as you can see, it did really well with all of these inks. Like I don't see any feathering, there wasn't any bleeding until I put tons of water on it, and yeah, I really like it. It's like not the best for showing all the ink properties, but if you're just doing some basic writing, or if you're doing like morning pages or something like that and you want to use fountain pens, I'd highly recommend it for that kind of application. I think the ream of 500 was somewhere between, I want to say it's around $18 for 500 sheets, and I think that's even less than the HP LaserJet paper that's usually recommended by people, and I prefer this because it's thinner, which I really like, that thin, somewhat crinkly feeling to my paper when I'm using fountain pens especially. So the waterproof test. Everything was waterproof. I mean, everything looks really good. I'd say the X feather had the biggest issue because, as you can see, some of the dye sort of, we have a prism that we've hung out on our balcony, and it's making a really pretty rainbow right now, so we can get a little bonus. But I would say for writing, you know, any of these is going to be totally fine. If you want the darkest ink, that's definitely going to be the Chou Kuro. and it's smooth, but not like too wet. I think that the Platinum Carbon Black also did fantastic, and it's a lot wetter. So any like fine, even the ultra extra fine in the platinum line, the 3776, even that is going to start to look like a fine or a fine medium with this ink. So it's not for making super, super fine lines. I would say that you'd have a better chance of that with the Atramentis Document Black, which was the only other black ink not to smear in the highlighter test. And neither of those budged at all, so I'd recommend those for watercolor. So if you're going to use, they're safe to use in fountain pens, just don't let them dry out if you can help it. And even if that happens, it's not a huge deal. I think you would just try to wash out with, if it's not a piston filler, you can use soap and that shouldn't affect anything. That can dry out piston fillers and make it so that you have to lubricate them again with silicone grease or something like that, because it strips off the oils that help that smooth flow. Or the lubricant, I should say, because you don't actually want oil in there. But you can also just get a relatively inexpensive ultrasonic cleaner, and even if your ink dries in a pen, as long as it's an easy to disassemble pen and it's okay going into an ultrasonic, it's totally fine to just put it in there. And the ink, the pigment is just basically solid particles. There's binder that comes with it. The binder usually will dissolve with warm water and soap, or it'll just all kind of release based on the ultrasonic waves and the vibration that happens. So I think a lot of the time we're just like kind of scared to use these inks because we've been told that they can gum up our pens. That's definitely true because there are solid particles in the ink. That's what the pigment is. It's basically really tiny solids that are suspended in solution. And that's basically what the ink is. So that solution has to bind the ink to the page, so it's got to have some kind of staying power as well, which is also what makes it a little bit harder sometimes to get out of pens. But the Atramentis Document Black has been really easy. I've used that probably the most. And I had cartridges. I think I used 3 cartridges back to back without doing any cleaning or anything, and no issues. It was with a Faber-Castell grip, fine. And let's see, it's this one. And I had 0 issues. Like, it didn't clog, it didn't dry up at all. I was using it in my planner last year. This year I switched to a plotter planner, and I'm using the Atramentis Document Urban Gray. I was trying to use that with my Preppy, but the flow was really bad and it kept feeling very choked and semi-clogged. So I switched it into this pen, which is quite a bit, it's a fine, but it's, you know, a Western fine, so it's quite a bit broader than the O2 Preppy. And I haven't had any issues with it so far. It's working really well. It isn't as smooth as the Document Black, but yeah, all of these inks did really well. You can't go wrong with them for writing. If you're going to do highlighting, the Platinum Carbon Black or the Atramentis inks or any of the blues are going to be your best bet. I hope this was a helpful video, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below or find me on Instagram, where you can send me a DM. Thanks so much for watching.